Behind the palace gates, where cameras never reach, a very different story unfolds. Prince Andrew, once cheered for his royal lineage, is remembered by former staff not for charm, but for demands, temper, and relentless expectations. From late-night buzzer calls to exacting instructions for even the smallest details, those who worked closest to him saw a side of the royal family the public rarely glimpsed. Now, decades later, former staff are speaking out. Their stories reveal a pattern of behavior that some describe as entitlement, arrogance, and cruelty, long before headlines expose the scandals. Like, share, and subscribe to get the full inside look at royal secrets. Working behind the palace walls gives a perspective few outsiders ever see. Den Otway, a former chef at Buckingham Palace, described Prince Andrew as difficult and demanding, setting him apart from other royals. While the public saw smiling balcony waves and carefully curated appearances, palace staff experienced a very different reality. Behind closed doors, minor mistakes or small lapses could trigger sharp words or sudden anger. Staff learned quickly that pleasing Andrew was often impossible, no matter how carefully they worked. These early accounts suggest that warning signs existed long before headlines revealed scandals. The stories paint a picture of a household where one prince operated under fewer rules, and staff often had to tread carefully to avoid conflict. The environment was strict and hierarchical, yet paradoxically, this structure could not protect staff from the prince's temper. Loyalty was expected, but respect was often one-sided. The question arises, what did those who served Andrew witness daily? How did they respond, and what subtle clues were there for anyone paying attention? These early testimonies offer the first glimpse into a side of Prince Andrew few in the public ever knew. Paul, a young valet, held one of the most stressful positions in the palace, living in a small apartment connected directly to Prince Andrew's rooms. While it seemed like a position of trust and honor, it quickly became a source of exhaustion. Andrew's buzzer could ring at any hour, not for emergencies, but for trivial requests. One well-known example involved the prince's Jack Russell Terrier. If the dog woke in the middle of the night, Paul had to take it outside, while Andrew stayed warm in bed. This constant demand left staff drained, often finding themselves muttering complaints or sneaking smoke breaks just to cope. The palace structure gave Andrew immense freedom while offering staff little recourse. They could not openly challenge him without risking their positions, and his status protected him from consequences. Frustration built over years, with small irritations snowballing into deep resentment. Some staff joked darkly about hoping Andrew's next vacation might provide a permanent escape, capturing both the humor and despair of their daily lives. The valet's burden illustrates the human cost of working for a royal accustomed to unquestioned obedience. Working at Buckingham Palace was not just a job, it was a life structured around strict hierarchy and rules. Staff were organized by rank, and every role had clear duties. Junior workers handled small tasks like preparing tea or cleaning, while senior officials managed formal events and attended to royals personally. Dining arrangements reflected these divisions. Some staff ate in separate rooms, others were served by white-gloved footmen. Even stairwells and hallways had an unspoken order, with everyone knowing who outranked whom. Loyalty was expected upward, and questioning a prince's decisions was simply not allowed. Speaking out risked one's job, pension, or housing, and complaints rarely traveled up the chain. This created a culture where fear and obedience went hand in hand. While the hierarchy kept the palace running smoothly, it also shielded bad behavior. Misconduct could continue unchecked because staff were trained to follow orders and avoid confrontation. The very structure that maintained royal efficiency also enabled a prince to act without consequences, leaving those closest to him to endure frustration silently. Prince Andrew was known among staff for an unpredictable temper that could turn minor irritations into full-blown incidents. Former employees described him shouting, swearing, and flying off the handle over seemingly small matters. One housemaid recalled him yelling over a tiny gap in the bedroom curtains, while other staff recounted strict rules for his stuffed animal collection, including diagrams showing exactly how each toy had to be arranged on his bed. These demands created an emotionally charged environment where staff often felt stressed, anxious, and constantly on edge. Even minor mistakes could trigger anger, leaving employees in tears or feeling humiliated. Protection officers and other staff sometimes witnessed these moments but could not intervene. Their role was to ensure safety, not to challenge his behavior. In contrast, other royals like Charles, Anne, and Edward treated staff with respect and professionalism. Charles made efforts to learn names, and demanded discipline but was fair, and Edward was kind and approachable. Andrew, however, stood out as the most difficult, creating a household where working every day felt like walking on eggshells, and fear was a constant companion. Charlotte, a former housemaid, became one of the most outspoken staff members about her experiences with Prince Andrew. Her interviews described a man who could be rude, temperamental, and impossible to satisfy. Even minor mistakes, like leaving a small gap in the bedroom curtains, could provoke shouting and harsh words. Staff felt constant pressure to meet impossible expectations, turning ordinary tasks into stressful, emotional challenges. These stories were not isolated incidents. Colleagues recalled witnessing similar outbursts and unrealistic demands over years, creating a workplace filled with fear and anxiety. Many employees left the palace with their confidence shaken, struggling to cope with the emotional toll. Charlotte's accounts also show that Andrew's behavior was consistent, not a sudden development. Staff observed a pattern of entitlement and intolerance that persisted from his youth into adulthood. The public may have seen only smiles and royal appearances, but these insider stories revealed a much harsher reality behind the palace walls. It was a glimpse into a world where obedience was demanded, and emotional strain was a daily part of life. Andrew's difficult behavior didn't start in adulthood. Accounts from childhood and early school years reveal flashes of cruelty, arrogance, and a sense of entitlement. At Gordonston, a Scottish school attended by several royals, Andrew reportedly mocked peers, had sudden outbursts, and earned unflattering nicknames. Teachers said he could be charming when he wanted, but his arrogance and disregard for rules often stood out. Stories from staff who knew him as a child, as well as biographers, suggest that these behaviors were consistent and well known within the royal household. Even minor conflicts with siblings or peers could trigger domineering or rude behavior. These early patterns foreshadowed how he would interact with staff later in life. In contrast, his siblings showed markedly different behavior towards staff. Charles was polite and made efforts to know employees personally, and demanded discipline but treated her team fairly, and Edward approached staff with kindness and respect. Andrew, by contrast, consistently displayed behavior that made working for him stressful and unpredictable, highlighting a long-standing pattern of entitlement and lack of empathy. Prince Andrew's position within the royal family offered him protection that few could challenge. His royal status, combined with the strict hierarchy of palace staff, allowed many of his behaviors to continue unchecked for years. Staff were trained to be loyal, and questioning a prince's actions was unthinkable. Fear of losing one's job, housing, or pension kept employees from speaking out, even when Andrew's behavior caused emotional strain or humiliation. Privilege created a shield. While other royals balanced status with discipline and respect for staff, Andrew seemed insulated from any consequences for rudeness or unreasonable demands. The palace structure itself reinforced this dynamic. Rules were enforced downward but rarely upward, loyalty flowed to the royal family, not accountability for individual actions. Mistreatment of staff was often tolerated or ignored to protect the family's reputation. This system allowed patterns of entitlement and harsh behavior to persist quietly. For decades, many staff endured stress, anxiety, and frustration in silence, trapped between professional duty and the fear of challenging a prince born into privilege. The early accounts of Andrew's difficult and demanding behavior gained new significance when viewed alongside later scandals. His friendship with Jeffrey Epstein and the accusations made by Virginia Giuffre drew global attention, linking decades of privilege and unchecked behavior to serious allegations. Andrew consistently denied wrongdoing publicly, famously in the 2019 BBC Newsnight interview, yet in 2022, he settled a civil lawsuit with Giuffre, avoiding a public trial. The settlement, reportedly supported financially by the Queen, was widely seen as a strategic move to prevent further scrutiny. These developments show a continuity of behavior patterns. The entitlement, lack of accountability, and expectation of unquestioned obedience that staff experienced in the palace mirrored his approach to relationships and social circles as an adult. Early warning signs, once overlooked or dismissed, gained renewed relevance. Staff anecdotes of rudeness, unreasonable demands, and emotional strain illustrate a pattern that arguably extended beyond the household into public and legal controversies. The private world of Buckingham Palace thus offers context for understanding Andrew's later challenges and public scrutiny. Prince Andrew's behavior stands out when compared with other members of the royal family. While siblings like Charles, Anne, and Edward balanced their privilege with courtesy and discipline, Andrew often demanded obedience rather than earning loyalty. Staff described a man who showed little empathy, expecting his instructions to be followed without question and reacting sharply when expectations were not met. This cultivated sense of entitlement was reinforced by the palace hierarchy. The rigid structure, combined with fear of losing jobs or housing, made it almost impossible for staff to challenge his behavior. Mistakes, real or imagined, could lead to verbal reprimands, yet accountability rarely reached the prince himself. Over time, these patterns became normalized within the household, creating an environment where harsh treatment was tolerated and even expected. The stories from staff reveal how privilege, status, and the protection of the family name allowed misconduct to continue. What outsiders saw as a charming prince was, behind closed doors, someone whose sense of entitlement shaped daily life for those who served him. For viewers, this invites reflection. How much has the public truly heard about life inside Buckingham Palace? As more insiders come forward, a fuller picture may emerge. For those fascinated by royal history, scandals, and behind-the-scenes truths, subscribe, like, and share to stay updated on these hidden stories that the palace would rather remain secret.